Hello everyone and good afternoon. Welcome to Synthesis Review Term 3 Part 1, where I'll be covering the different synthesis items we've covered through the course of this term. I'll be doing them in groups of related synthesis items that potentially can be rather confusing. So I'll be using this opportunity to review the main characteristics of each synthesis item. I'll be comparing them to each other to show you where some confusing elements may arise so that you don't make these mistakes. And finally, I'll be pointing you to a few questions you can attempt at the end of this review to show me that you've understood the principles of what I've covered, and I'll give you some feedback based on these very few practice questions that I'll be posting along with the video and these PowerPoint slides in Edmodo at the end of this evening. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into the first part where I'll be talking about prefer to and would rather than. Two very commonly mistaken synthesis items because their meanings are very similar, even though the way that they work is different. Alright, so let's begin with prefer to. As you'll notice in the bracket on top, prefer to is followed by a bracket N, and in case you're wondering, it stands for nouns, right? Because prefer to talks about preference for or preference of something over another. So it deals with nouns and noun phrases. So let's look at this example. Madhu likes binoculars. Binoculars are objects. Madhu likes microscopes even more. Microscopes are objects. So these are two objects, two noun phrases. All right. They're normal nouns, they're not proper nouns, so they're not capitalized. Madhu likes binoculars. Madhu likes microscopes even more. And the words even more tell me that Madhu likes microscopes more than binoculars. So Madhu prefers microscopes to binoculars. Notice that the object that is liked more or preferred more always follows the connector prefers. Alright, it will be the same later for the other connector. So remember, whatever you like more always follows the first connector prefers. Notice also that subject-verb agreement rule applies. Madhu, a singular subject, takes on prefers a singular verb. One puts S after the verb. Okay, so subject-verb agreement rule applies in prefers to. Right? So likes more equals to prefers, therefore Madhu prefers microscopes to binoculars. Let's take a look at another example. Brandon likes chasing tigers. Brandon does not like tickling Ziming. Right? So which does Brandon like more? Right, obviously chasing tigers because he doesn't like tickling Ziming. So that's one. Secondly, let's take a look at the things that are being compared here. Chasing tigers, tickling Ziming. Do you notice that chasing and tickling are, that's right, gerunds. They are gerunds, verbs that are functioning as nouns because they've had the suffix ing added to them. Okay, very good. So Brandon prefers chasing tigers to tickling Ziming. And chasing tigers and tickling Ziming are noun phrases because chasing and tickling are gerunds. They're noun phrases, right? So now let's move on to would rather than. Prefer to, remember, was about nouns. So would rather than is about? That's right, verbs and verb phrases. All right, so this connector is similar to prefer to in the sense that it talks about preference, whatever you like more. However, it is comparing actions, verbs, and not nouns, objects. Okay, so actions and verbs are what would rather than compares. So Don likes catching blue unicorns. Don likes playing with pink dolphins even more. So there are two things going on here, catching blue unicorns and playing with pink dolphins. Which one does Dawn like more? Yes, that's right, because even more tells me she likes playing with pink dolphins more. However, the form is in the gerund or noun phrase form, right? So playing with pink dolphins, playing is a gerund. I can't leave it in its noun phrase form because would rather than deals with verbs. Therefore, right? Oh, sorry, there's a mistake. It shouldn't be Madhu, it should be Dawn. So Dawn would rather play with pink dolphins than catch blue unicorns. So notice playing becomes play. So playing, the gerund, removes the ing, becomes play, the verb. Catching, the gerund, removes ing, becomes catch, the verb. Alright, so in order to change the sentence, I need to convert any nouns or noun phrases into verbs and verb phrases so that it can fit into the would rather than synthesis structure. Okay, would rather than, remember, doesn't deal with nouns, it only deals with verbs and verb phrases. So would rather play than catch. Alright? At this point, I'll give you a little bit more time to process. And let's move on to another example. Okay? Kaylin enjoys attending fashion shows and not crazy parties. So first question I always ask myself, and you should ask yourself, which one does Kaylin prefer more? Yes, of course, it's attending fashion shows, right? Because the word not tells me she doesn't like crazy parties. Next is attending, right? Attending is in its gerund form, so I can't leave it as attending. I've got to change it to, that's right, attend, okay? So here you have the answer. Kaylin would rather attend fashion shows than crazy parties. So would rather than always works as a unit, and it compares two different actions. Wait a minute, Mr. Pang. I see your hands raised. I see quizzical looks on your faces. What about crazy parties? Doesn't this function as a noun phrase? Crazy parties, it's something, right? But no, remember there is an invisible attend here, right? Because attend fashion shows, attend crazy parties, right? But because attend is repeated, right, it's cancelled here, but it's invisible. It's still attend fashion shows, attend crazy parties, right? So synthesis rule number 4 cancels out the repeated attend, but still has its influence here. So attend is the same verb that applies to both fashion shows and crazy parties. So attend fashion shows, attend crazy parties. Therefore attend has been deleted here due to repetition, but it still has its influence there. Therefore this still functions as a verb phrase. Attend crazy parties, attend fashion shows. So that doesn't break the rule of would rather than only taking verb phrases. I hope that's easy to understand for you. Right? So they're verb phrases. Now let's compare prefer to and would rather than side by side, because there are very, very often people who talk about prefer than and would rather to. Okay, so never do that. Prefer to, they're married. Would rather than, they're married. Okay, so they belong together. They belong together. They should not mix. Okay, next, let's look at the features of both and let's compare them side by side. Prefer to, remember nouns and noun phrases only. Take on subject-verb agreement. And often have the gerund form of the noun phrase, okay, in them. Would rather than, on the other hand, connects verbs and verb phrases. The verb is always in the base form, so you see the boys would rather swim, James would rather swim. It doesn't matter whether the subjects are singular or plural, the verb is in its base form because of the structure would rather than, limiting it to the base form. So you can add this to the other two base forms that I've taught you, verb, noun, verb, and the to verb structure. Would rather than also forces the verb that comes after it to take on the base form. Interesting, isn't it? Right? So that's different from subject-verb agreement rule for prefers to, right? And in the case of camp and stay, they are verbs, right? They are verbs. They do not function as nouns, they are verbs, because would rather than only takes on verbs, prefer to only takes on nouns. I hope this has helped you to understand a little bit more clearly the difference between how prefer to is used and would rather than is used. They are similar in meaning but different in their usage. Okay, prefer to takes on nouns, would rather than takes on verbs. Right? Prefer to has subject-verb agreement, would rather than takes on the verb in its base form. Right? If you have any more questions, please post them on the assignment question and answer section that I'm going to post in Edmodo. I'm also going to put up a few questions for you to try. Please submit them all together when you've viewed all 3 videos and done all 3 quizzes. Submit them in one Word document. And I look forward to looking at your answers and giving you feedback based on them. I hope this helps you to understand it better. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember, keep calm. Don't get confused between the two. Okay? Goodbye.